Wow. So, okay, it's recording now, so we can start.
All right. I guess I'll get started. By way of introduction, I'm Ryan Cooley. I'm one of the engineers on the ProcessMaker 4 project. I've also been working closely on this presentation with Sonia, who I believe is on the line. Sonia, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone.
So together we were tasked with putting together a training pretty quickly. So we're doing what we can, so bear with us. We put this all together very quickly, but we definitely want to be as comprehensive as possible. So we've got about 2 hours to get through quite a few topics, and we're going to do the best we can, but if we don't finish everything today, we can probably schedule a future training. So yeah, so let me go ahead and share my screen. Oh, host disabled attendee screen sharing. So if someone can enable me to share my screen, that would be great.
There you go.
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, great. Can everyone see the slide?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So today we're going to talk about package development for ProcessMaker 4. And we have 4 key areas that we want to get through. First one is getting started. So we want to talk about installing ProcessMaker and configuring your environment for development. We're going to do this all totally from scratch, so you can see how we get started at the very beginning. Then we're going to go through the basics. So we're going to go through cloning and configuring the skeleton package. We're going to talk about writing unit tests, the package provider, routes, blade template changes, and Vue.js changes. Then we're going to talk about deployment, which includes running PHP unit. So that's for our test-driven development, and then building for production so that we can end up deploying that. And then finally, time permitting, Sonia is going to talk about injecting components. That involves adding controls to the screen builder, registering new screen types, adding controls to the modeler, and extending existing components. So let's get started. So you see here, I have a Mac that I have totally reformatted. So this is basically a brand new installation, has nothing installed on it at the moment. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to install all the tools that we need to run ProcessMaker. So the very first thing I'm going to do is go to GitHub, go to the ProcessMaker repo, and you'll see down here there's a lot of instructions, pretty clear instructions, pretty thorough instructions on how to set up ProcessMaker and the requirements to do that. You can see we require VirtualBox, Vagrant, PHP, Composer, Node. So we're going to install all of that right now. So the very first thing we're going to do is, I have some bookmarks up here just to get to these more quickly. We'll definitely share these links with you after the meeting. So first thing I'm going to do is install VirtualBox. Then we're going to download Vagrant. Okay. So now in my downloads folder, I have both of those. I'm going to install VirtualBox first. And bear with me, like I said, this is a totally clean instance, so it's going to take some time to set this all up, but we want it to be as thorough as possible. If you have any questions while we're waiting for things to install, feel free to jump in.
Could you talk about what Vagrant is and why we use it?
Sure, that's a great idea. So VirtualBox is a open security preferences. VirtualBox allows us to run virtual machines on our host machine. Our host machine in this case is a Mac. It can also run on Windows, Linux, all that, but it allows you to basically run other computers within your computer. So what that allows us to do is to run, okay, the installation failed, but that's just because we needed to give it permission to do that. So we just need to run that again. So I'm going to run VirtualBox. All right. So yes, as I was saying, VirtualBox allows us to run machines within a machine. And in this case, it allows us to run an environment that will run ProcessMaker 4. An environment that's very similar to the environment where we actually run ProcessMaker 4 on our servers, and that is using Linux. So that is what VirtualBox does. What Vagrant does is it allows you to, here, let me install this real quick. I don't want to take too much time on that. There we go. So Vagrant, as it says here, is a tool for building and managing virtual machine environments. So basically it allows you to configure virtual machine environments via a configuration file, and then to instantly run. It'll download the instance that you specify in the configuration file, and it will set everything up for you. So that's what Vagrant does in a nutshell. So now we have VirtualBox and Vagrant. Installation was successful, so there we go. Now, we also have PHP, Composer, and Node. So one thing I wanted to kind of explain, Node is an environment that allows you to run JavaScript outside of a web browser. And NPM is a package manager that works alongside Node in order to allow you to install open source packages that anyone around the internet has created. PHP, of course, is our programming language that the back-end part of ProcessMaker 4 is built in. Composer is the package manager for PHP. It allows you to do much the same thing as NPM does for Node, in that you can install various packages, open source packages. You can also install closed source packages, and that's something that we'll show you today as well. So going back here, we have, as part of the Macintosh operating system, we have PHP already built in. So you can see I've just opened a terminal window on the Mac here, and I'm going to type php-v, and that's going to tell me which version of PHP I have installed. I have a pretty recent version, so that's good. So we already have PHP installed. We do need to install Composer. So we're going to go to Composer. Now you see here there's a lot of information. Here's the installation information right here. So I'm going to go to the download page. I'm going to copy and paste these commands here. Now make sure, one thing to note for security reasons, if you're going to copy and paste commands into your terminal, make sure you're doing it from a trusted source. We know that we're getting this directly from Composer. We see the lock icon, so we know we're on Composer's website. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste that and then run that. Now it's going to download Composer for me. And you'll see that if I list that directory, I have a composer.far file right there. Now, one thing I want to do is install that globally so I don't have to be in that directory to run it. So I'm just going to follow the instructions here where it says global install. So I'm going to move composer.far to user local bin composer. I am going to have to sudo that. My password. That means I'm doing it as an administrator. Now, if I reopen terminal and I run Composer, it works. So we've got Composer installed properly now. Now, let's see, we need to install Node. So the way I recommend to install Node is using something called NVM, which is, I believe it stands for the Node Version Manager. Yes, Node Version Manager. That allows you to install, let me go ahead and download this here. That allows you to install any version of Node and any version of NPM that you want at any given time. That way, if you're in a project, say you're in a project that is based on an older version of Node, within that project, you can use the older version of Node, and then globally, you can use a different version of Node, just in case you need to be able to do that. It makes it really easy to manage your Node and NPM installs. Okay, so you see right here, something just came up. The Git command requires the command line developer tools. When you have a new Mac, Git is not pre-installed, but it does allow you to easily install it as part of the developer tools. So I'm going to go ahead and click install. And it's going to download that in the background. Any other questions while we're waiting? Ooh, that's good.
Yeah, can we call out, so the reason why we install Node on the desktop directly versus having it running in the Vagrant VirtualBox?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
So, well, I can answer my own question. So
Okay.
we install npm locally and not on the VM. I mean, it is already on the VM when you install the Vagrant, but is that compiling JavaScript assets on the local machine in the Mac versus the VM is faster and more efficient, and it generates the same files as if you did it inside of the virtual machine. We found that there's significant performance improvements to doing that, especially if you're doing a lot of JavaScript development where there's a lot of waiting that happens while you're watching and doing your changes.
Yep. So it looks like for some reason, of course, in the middle of the demo, it looks like one of Apple's servers is down because it's looking for the software and it's not able to find it. So this is the kind of thing you're going to encounter. Not everything's going to go perfectly when you go to install certain things. So you just kind of have to find workarounds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Git homepage, just gitscm.com. You could just find that on Google. You don't have to memorize the URL, obviously. Now you see Git is an open source distributed version control system. So I'm going to click on downloads, click on Mac OS X, and what it asks me to do is install Homebrew. So Homebrew is essentially a package manager for OS X. So just like we were talking about, Composer and NPM are package managers for Node and for PHP, Homebrew is a package manager for OS X. So they have a very simple install process for Homebrew. So I'm going to copy and paste that. Again, if you're copying and pasting commands in your terminal, just be careful. Make sure you're on a trusted website. So we're going to run that. And that will take a minute. Press return. There we go. Searching online for the command line tools. Now this might be interesting because that is the thing that it was trying to install before from Apple, and Apple server was down. So we might hit a roadblock here again, but let's see. Yeah, I have a feeling something is going on with the Apple server today. So let's see how that's working out. Download command line.
The latest version of iOS is out, so.
Yeah, that's probably why. Now you see on the Git homepage here, they do have multiple options. We could build from source, which will take a long time. They do have a binary installer. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. We have the Git OS X installer. Let's download that. Yeah, you see this is, maybe downloaded, installing. Okay. We'll see if that works. In the meantime, as a backup, we'll go ahead and start downloading the Git OS X installer. Installing command line tools for Xcode. Okay, so while we're waiting for that to see if that works, let's see what else we can talk about here. Let me pull up my notes real quick. Okay, so we have Composer installed. We're waiting to be able to install Node as well as Git. Once we have Git installed, we're also going to be able to clone the ProcessMaker repository into our local machine. So it looks like that's going to take too long, so I'm going to go ahead and just install Git from the Git installer here. Cannot be opened because it is from an unidentified developer. Okay. We are hitting every possible roadblock here today. Let's see.
Yeah, go security and privacy.
Yeah, that's right. There we go. Open anyway. There we go. Okay. So now we have both of them running at the same time, but that's okay. We can still install Homebrew and install Git this way. We can do both at the same time. Okay. All right. So while that's running in the background, I'm going to open a new terminal window, and I'm going to type git-v just to see. Okay, it's not git-v, but git does work. So we do have that working now. Okay, so now that we have git working, we can try to install NVM again. So again, NVM is the version manager that allows you to manage your node and NPM installations. All right. Let's see here. It wasn't actually running it, it was just downloading it. Okay. Close and reopen your terminal. So we'll open a new window. Let's see, NVM not found. Profile not found. Let's see what's going on here. Let's see if we have an NVM directory. We do. Export, we need to add this to our profile. So we do have, so this is where things can get a little bit complicated. We have to add NVM to our, whatchamacallit, our bash profile. So I'm going to create, we're actually using ZSH. Paste that in there. Let's see if that works. Of course not. Why would it work? Let's see. It might be .zshrc. Let me double check here. Yeah, .zshrc, that is the version that is where we're able to do that. Okay. So let's try this again. Of course not. Let's see what we're doing wrong here. So this is part of the process, is having to go through and figure out what's going wrong. One thing we could do is just install node directly from the repo, so we can skip the NVM install.
You could use brew as well.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, now brew's done, maybe. There's an error there, of course, too. All right, let's just try installing node just to start with. This will install node and npm. The only disadvantage to doing it this way is that you're stuck on the version that you install, which isn't a terrible thing. Generally, the newest version will work with ProcessMaker. Okay, so there we go. All right, so let's see how that worked. We've got npm and node. There we go. Okay, so we've got all of that installed. Thanks for bearing with us there. Now we are able, now that we have Git installed, we are able to clone the repository into a directory. So what you want to do is you want to set up a location on your machine where all of your code can live. Generally, what I like to do is go to my user folder. So if I say I'm on the desktop in the Finder, it's under your hard drive, users, and then your username. So my username is Ryan Cooley. Generally, what I like to do is create a folder called sites. A lot of people use the name code. You can basically call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it sites. You can see it even already has a nice icon for that there. So we're going to have that there. And you can see when I go into the terminal, it lists sites. So we're going to switch to the sites directory. Okay. Now we're going to, on the GitHub page here, every GitHub page has an area where you can go to download the repo. So you can see here, you have a few different options. You can open with GitHub Desktop, you can download the zip file, or you can clone it. So we're going to clone it. I'm just going to copy this SSH.
Don't clone 4.1, clone develop.
Yeah, I think this just clones the whole repo, and then we can check out develop.
Sorry.
Yeah, but you can also, if you want to make sure you're on the right branch, switch to the develop branch there, and then we'll go ahead and copy that there. So we're going to oops, we're going to run git clone, and then I'm going to paste what I copied from GitHub. So that's the command we run. It's going to ask me to verify that. I'm going to say yes. And permission denied, of course. Let's see, please make sure you have the correct access rights and the repository exists. That's interesting because it is a public repo, so I'm not sure why that would fail. Let's try doing it over HTTPS instead. Okay, there we go. So for some reason it didn't want to work over SSH, but over HTTPS we're able to get it. Okay, so now if we look at that directory, you can see ProcessMaker is there. The whole package is magically in our directory. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to follow the directions. So clone the repository into a directory. Then we're going to perform composer install to install the required libraries. So I'm going to switch to the ProcessMaker directory in terminal, and I'm going to run composer install. Installation request satisfiable by Laravel Horizon. All right. Well, that's a fun one.
Do Vagrant up and then SSH into the Vagrant and then do Composer install.
Let's try that.
The other thing you can do is you can do composer ignore space dash dash ignore platform dash rex. This will ignore, yes, this will ignore host system requirements, because ProcessMaker will be running inside the Vagrant, which will have all the required PHP extensions and things like that. This is the first time that you have to use composer ignore platform rex. This will ignore any kind of required PHP extensions being installed, because like I mentioned, ProcessMaker will be running in Vagrant, which will have all the PHP extensions required.
Perfect. Thank you, Taylor. So that helped us out. So you see the command here, composer dash dash ignore platform rex install. So as we wait for that to install, let's go ahead and pre-read through some of the next instructions here. After that's done, we're going to run npm install. Then we're going to run npm run dev. So npm install will do essentially the same thing that composer install is doing. npm install will take any node packages that we need and install them in that directory. And then npm run dev, that's a very important step. That will build all of our assets for development. So all of our JavaScript, CSS, any asset that needs to be built will be built for development when we run npm run dev. There's also, let's see, it looks like we ran into an issue here. Oh, that's fun. Source path users, Nolan, source, Laradoc packages, ProcessMaker. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Let's see what we can do about that. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. I'm going to install our code editor, which is VS Code. This is the one that I recommend. This is one that most of the company seems to use. There are others. There's Atom. There's PHP Storm, I believe. There's a bunch of different code editors that you can use. But in this case, we're going to use Visual Studio Code, because now we have to troubleshoot this error that we have here. Okay, so I'm going to maximize that to full screen, and then I'm going to open our ProcessMaker folder. There we go. You see we have all of our files listed in here. Now I'm going to open our composer.json. Composer.json is where all of the requirements for composer packages lives. So let's see. It looks like we were getting that error from the Docker executor Lua. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and remove that requirement from our composer.json. So you see here, this lists all of the required packages, and then I'm looking for the package that's failing. I'm just going to remove that. And then we're going to run that. So we're also going to remove the composer.lock file. The composer.lock file is what locks packages to a specific version. Generally, that's something that is disposable. We don't necessarily need to keep that if it's causing issues. So we're going to go ahead and remove that composer.lock, and then we're going to run composer install once again. All right, so as that's running, put this over here. So we skipped ahead a little bit. We installed Visual Studio Code, which is our code editor. Now we ran into another issue with composer install, which is that we ran into a rate limit trying to install a package. So we simply have to follow the instructions that come up here. It says head to this URL to retrieve a token. So I'm going to go ahead and go to that URL, put in my password. There we go. And we're creating a new personal access token that's going to allow us to exceed the rate limit that GitHub has set. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this personal access token and paste it into the terminal. Okay, so you can see the process isn't 100% smooth. There are things that go wrong, and there are things that we have to troubleshoot as we work on that. So as I was explaining, npm run dev is what allows us to build all of our assets. We're going to get to that a little bit later. One thing we can do while we're waiting for this is modify our host file. So the host file is essentially what maps certain IP addresses to certain domain names within your local system. Normally, you would get that information from a DNS server, but the host file overrides that. So the host file is the ultimate authority for where domain names, which IP addresses domain names point to on your system. So I'm going to open a new tab there. I'm going to go to the etc directory. I'm going to list that out, and you'll see there's a lot of different files in there. The one that we want to edit is the host file. So we're going to probably need to run that as an admin. So we'll do that. And hosts. Ask me for my password. Okay, you can see here we have a lot of hosts listed. What we want to add is this 192.168.10.10. And oops, I definitely spelled that wrong. Now what this does, this is the address that our virtual machine is going to run at, 192.168.10.10, and then processmaker.local.processmaker.com is a mouthful, but that is the domain name where we're going to actually be able to access our ProcessMaker instance. So rather than having to use the IP address in our web browser, we're able to just use this address. I'm going to go ahead and save that. All right, and we have exceeded our memory limit. So this is an issue that comes up. Composer has a memory leak, especially with larger projects like ours. So once again, we ran into a Composer issue, but it is easily solved. Yeah, I was just going to say, we're going to run composer memory limit is equal to -1. That basically enables Composer to have unlimited memory. Was there something you wanted to add, Taylor?
Nope, that's perfect.
Okay, cool. I just didn't know if maybe you knew a secret other way of getting around it. Okay, so while that's running, let's see if we can go through everything else here. So we've modified our etc hosts. Once all of this is done, we're going to run Vagrant up. What Vagrant up does is it brings up your virtual machine. So it starts your virtual machine in the background. Vagrant SSH, once Vagrant up is done running, Vagrant SSH allows you to log into that instance via SSH, access any terminal commands that you want to access in there. And then once we're within the virtual machine, we want to run PHP Artisan ProcessMaker install. So Artisan is the command line tool that comes with Laravel, which is what ProcessMaker is based on. And ProcessMaker install is a console command that we can run to actually generate our environment file for ProcessMaker so that it runs smoothly on our system. Once that's all done, we're going to visit processmaker.local.processmaker.com in our browser, and we'll be able to actually, hopefully, knock on wood, we'll be able to see our website. So as we're waiting on that, let's see, any questions?
Right now the ProcessMaker repo is pointing to develop, right?
ProcessMaker repo is pointing to develop. Well, that is a good thing to check, isn't it? We're on 4.1. So I'm glad you caught that. So let's go ahead and check out develop. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and remove those. Just 1 second here. Stash those for now. Okay. Okay, so now we're in the proper branch. We're in the develop branch. Okay. So one more time, thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate that. So one more time, we're going to go ahead and remove the Lua executor in case we run into that issue again. And we're going to remove the composer.lock file. And we're going to run composer install, except we have to run with those specific.
Hold on 1 second. You shouldn't be removing the composer lock file, right? Oh yeah, because did you do that because you were switching branch?
Did that because we removed the Lua executor, and when we did that, it told us that the composer lock file was out of date.
Right. So ideally, you want to recheck out the composer lock file that's in the repo, right?
Yes.
Okay,
ideally, but it does generally, because all the versions are also specified in the composer JSON. It generally works.
Okay.
Yeah. So you see here, it just installed that. So what that command did is it installed everything in our vendor directory. So if we look in here now, you can see we have a bunch of directories within the vendor directory. And that is where all of our vendor files are stored. Okay, now we're going to move on to running npm install. So I'm just going to double check, make sure we have npm working. We do. I'm going to run npm install. So you can see all this initial setup stuff takes quite a while because it has to download everything. But once it's all downloaded, it will move pretty smoothly. Okay, there we go. And just for future reference, all of those files are stored in the node modules directory. So similar to the vendor folder for Composer, node modules is where all of the node modules are stored. So now we're going to run npm run dev. And that's going to build, like I said, that's going to build out all of our assets, all of our JavaScript, CSS, all that stuff. While that's running, because that's going to take a while, I'm going to open a new tab. And we've already modified our etc hosts, but we have not run Vagrant up. So I'm going to run Vagrant up. Path to my private key does not exist. Interesting. All right, let's see what that's about. Check your homestead.yaml file. So let's look at our homestead.yaml.
Because this is a new Mac install, you probably do not have a SSH key generated.
Gotcha. So I'm trying to remember the command to do that again. Is it SSH keygen? Sorry?
Yeah, yes, it should be keyed in, but I don't know if there's any parameters for Mac.
Yeah, let's double check here. Ah, okay, perfect. Okay, there we go. Cool. So now we'll run Vagrant up. And you can see what it's doing is it's going to the cloud and it's looking for a specific box. In this case, the box is Laravel Homestead, which is something that was created by the Laravel creator in order to run Laravel in its desired environment. So as it's downloading, wait for that. You can see, I'm going to switch back to the other tab here. You can see that npm run dev ran just fine. It gives you, at the end there, it gives you a list of files that have been modified. So these are all the different files that it built or that it copied. So you can see it copied the image files. If I scroll up here, you can see the CSS files that it generated, JavaScript files it generated, so on and so forth. So that's going to take another 3 minutes or so. So let's talk a little bit more about tools while we're waiting for that. So we have VS Code. That's our main developer tool that we're using to actually edit the code. We also want to install some other things. So we have Chrome. Chrome is the main browser that we use to test ProcessMaker on. We do support other browsers, but in general, the development team uses Chrome as our main development browser. So I'm going to go ahead and install that. Now, this isn't to say you should exclusively test in Chrome. When you're done with a feature, it's always smart to use Safari, use Firefox as well, and maybe even Microsoft Edge, just to make sure that your code runs smoothly in every browser. Okay, so we've got Chrome installed. Some other tools that you can download. GitHub Desktop is a great UI for managing your Git repos locally. Sometimes it's helpful to have a UI to be able to see all of the changes that you've made in Git rather than doing it all on the command line. So I definitely recommend something like that. There's also one that I use called Tower, which is very similar to GitHub Desktop. It is a paid product, but it also allows you to see everything visually. I'm more of a visual guy. That's why I like that.
I'd like to point out too that the visual GitHub tool also makes it easier so that you don't commit files that you didn't need to change. If you do testing and do manipulation of your project, it's not common for you to touch multiple files and for it to reformat them for you where you didn't actually make the change. And you really don't want to commit those changes if you didn't actually make them.
Yeah, exactly. So you can see here, it makes it super simple and visual to see exactly what you're committing, what your pull requests look like, even all that stuff. GitHub Desktop is much the same. Another tool that we use a lot is called SQL Pro. That is a visual way of managing MySQL. So one thing about SQL Pro is it's an open source piece of software. The latest version listed on their homepage is actually a little bit older, but if you go into more and test builds, they have some more recent builds that work a little bit better on newer versions of Mac. So I'm going to go ahead and copy these over to the applications folder. So now within our applications folder, we have GitHub Desktop, SQL Pro. Another tool that we use a lot is Postman. That allows us to test any API endpoints that we've built. Another one that I've just used for longer, so I'm more familiar with it, is called Paw. It does much the same thing. It allows you to see up here, you can enter an API endpoint, and then you can configure it with any headers, parameters, body, anything you want, and then it returns the results in a very readable format. So I highly recommend that you use something like Postman or Paw in order to do API development, if that's something that you are working on. Any other tools that you guys like to use? Anything, Sonia or Alan or Taylor, that you've found that helpful?
I really like Brew. I mean, you already went over that.
Yeah.
but I use VS Code also. There's actually an extension for VS Code for MySQL if you wanted to have it all in one tool.
Nice.
But
I use command line.
Oh.
Taylor's hardcore. He uses the command line.
Like a boss.
Like a boss. Yep. I'm more of a visual guy. That's why I like all these UI tools. It doesn't look as hacker cool, as Taylor does, but I think it's pretty cool still.
That's why I wear sunglasses when I do my SQL command line.
All right, so you can see this process takes quite a while. Vagrant up takes quite a while to download because it's downloading an entire Linux box essentially. So that's just something we have to wait on as we move forward. But one thing we can talk about while we're waiting is all of the different ProcessMaker repos that we have in here. We're up to an even 100 repos. ProcessMaker is our main repo within the ProcessMaker GitHub account. You can also see we have a bunch of packages. So if you just search for the word package, that will show you all of the packages that we have available. Most of these are paid packages, enterprise packages, so they're marked as private, so you do have to have access to those. The one that we want to focus on today is called Package Skeleton. And Package Skeleton, as it says here, it provides the necessary base code to start developing a package in ProcessMaker 4. So once this is all done, and once we have our actual ProcessMaker instance up and running, we're going to also install the ProcessMaker Package Skeleton. And what that allows you to do is it provides you with a very simple code base for a basic package, basically a hello world version of a package. And then from there, you're able to modify it to actually create the package that you want to create. So this is this is essentially how all of our packages start. So we have a lot of bigger packages now. Save Search is a large package. Our collections package is a large package, but they all started as the package skeleton. So as a developer, if I wanted to start a package, I would clone package skeleton locally. And this is something we're going to do a little bit later. Then you're able to rename the project to whatever you want to call it. Then you do much the same thing that we're doing here. We run composer install, we run npm install, and we run npm run dev. So that is something that we'll go into as soon as this is done. Alan, is there anything else you wanted to talk about while we're waiting on this?
I don't have anything to fill time with. Nope.
All right.
Anyone have any jokes? Is there anything in regards to maybe the code that maybe you want to start navigating and talking about while we wait for this to install?
That's a good idea. So we'll talk about the basic structure of the skeleton package here. We have our public folder. That is where a lot of our CSS and JavaScript assets live after they've been built. So once the CSS and JavaScript are built, it creates a mix manifest, which basically maps the file name to what the front end will see when it goes to download the file. Now you'll see a lot of these random IDs here that are random hashes. The reason for that is to bust caches essentially. So if you update a package.js file, for example, and you want your user to make sure they have the latest package.js file, changing the hash ensures that the browser cache doesn't use an older version of the package.js. And that these are automatically generated when you build your assets. So that's the public folder. Then we have the resources folder. This is where all of those assets come from, essentially. So this is the JavaScript. In this case, we use a lot of Sass, and where all of the views live. And these are the files that get compiled into that public folder. So we have our JavaScript here. We have our basic package.js file. And you can see in here, we're importing Vue, Bootstrap Vue, vmodal, all sorts of stuff. And we're doing some basic stuff in there. We also have some components, some common components that we use, our data loading component, pagination. We have some mix-ins. We have our listing table. So these are just sample components that we've put in there just to make it a little bit easier. Here's our SCSS file, which is totally empty, but you're able to do any of your CSS changes in there. And then our views, this is where all of our Laravel Blade templates live. So you can see we have a basic Blade template that actually integrates some of the view components in here. And that is what is in the resources folder. Now, if we go to the routes folder, that's where we actually set up our web and API routes primarily. We also have console routes. So let's take a look at the API routes first. You can see here, we just have, like I said, this is all example code. This is all boilerplate stuff that you can replace later. But under the API, you have admin, package, skeleton, fetch. So essentially the way this works is it adds on to whatever core routes are available in the API. So if you look at our, for example, let me go here. You can see it's structured much in the same way as our package folder. So if I go to API routes here, you can see we have a ton of API routes in here. For users, groups, group members, environment variables, things like that. And based on the prefix here, they all live under this, this URL. So if you go to processmaker.local.processmaker.com/API/1.0/users, that's what will get you to this endpoint here. And same with the API routes within a package. So if you create /admin/package skeleton/fetch, you add that onto the API/1.0 here, and that will show that route when you go to that. Let's see. Okay, so that's still downloading. Now we're going to go to the web routes. Much in the same way as API routes work, web routes work pretty much the same way, except generally they're at the top level. So you don't have to add, of course, API/1.0 to the URL to get them. You simply go to /admin/package skeleton in this case, and you would see whatever this controller is showing in the index method.
If you have questions about routing or how routing works, we use standard Laravel routing. So there are extensive Laracast videos, tutorials, and walkthroughs on how those work and how to secure those and different strategies for using those.
Yep. And then we have our console here. These are our console routes. This is a basic way of getting our, I told you earlier about PHP Artisan. This adds commands to PHP Artisan. So you're able to say artisan command package skeleton install, and then it goes through a basic install process for you. So those are that's the routes folder. We have our source folder. That's where most of our logic, our actual business logic lives. Let me keep that open so we can keep an eye on that. So you can see it's laid out much in the same way as our ProcessMaker folder is within the core code base. So let's look at that here. So we have HTTP, just like we have ProcessMaker/HTTP. So within the HTTP folder, we have controllers and our package skeleton controller. You see we have our index method, and that's what I was showing you in the routes before. So all the index method does is it returns a Blade template view. So that is where our controllers live. We also have middleware, add to menus. This is how, and we'll get to this later, this is how you're able to add items to our sidebar menu within ProcessMaker. We have listeners. This is our package listener. It handles certain package events. Essentially, I believe what is happening here is it's registering this package within ProcessMaker core so that ProcessMaker core knows it exists. Then we have our models. This, of course, is just a sample model, but this is where you would store any database models that you want to store. And when you create a new model, you would place it here. One thing to keep in mind is all of this stuff is namespaced. So it's all namespaced within ProcessMaker package and then the name of the package. So of course, the name of this package is package skeleton, but when you go to run the rename command, it will automatically go through your code and rename package skeleton to whatever you end up calling it. So it's important to note that everything within this code base is namespaced so that we avoid overwriting other packages or the core code.
Maybe one note on that, just to call it, when you do create new models, even new controllers, there are artisan commands that you can run where you run PHP artisan create model, and it will take care of all the namespacing and naming and configuring everything for you automatically.
Yep.
You don't manually create those things.
Yeah, the artisan tools are a great thing to learn and to use as much as possible, because it can really help you automate a lot of things that would otherwise take a lot of time. And then we have our provider. So our package service provider, this is a really important concept to understand. So essentially, anything that you place in the boot method of the package service provider will run every time ProcessMaker is loaded. So once this package is added to our ProcessMaker instance, all of this code runs every single time you load a page in ProcessMaker. So you can see what's happening here is we are including the console routes if we're running in the console. Otherwise, we are including the web and API routes here. This tells ProcessMaker where to find the views. So where to find the views specific to this package. This right here tells Laravel and ProcessMaker where to find the public files that it needs. And then this registers the listener that we were looking at earlier. So a lot of stuff can happen within the package service provider, and that's a really important concept to understand. Then we have our test folder. So for test-driven development, we want to make sure that we test as much of our code as possible. So we have an example test here, really simple example test. It's namespaced under tests and then package skeleton. And then we're using our core test case, and we're extending that. And we have a very simple test here. Note that any test you write needs to have test at the beginning of the name. And then we're simply asserting that true is equal to true. And that's just so that we can test and make sure that our tests are running properly. So we'll go over adding more tests a little bit later. Then you can see here we have a little more boilerplate type stuff. We have our gitignore file. We have our license file, our readme, which is what generates this. So when you do eventually decide to publish this package, you want to make sure the readme is updated to reflect the package that you've actually published, any specific instructions for that package, things like that. I can show you an example of that if we go back to our ProcessMaker repos here, and let's look at the save search package, for example. We don't have a lot of stuff in there. I believe we have one of these packages has a little more information, but you can see that's the basic README. So we've updated it just to say package collections and then to describe what the package does. There are some packages that have more information than that. So here, for example, this is the data sources package, and it tells you exactly how to install the package, how to set it up with the artisan command, and then it gives you information on uninstalling it as well. Not sure why terminal needs to access my microphone, but go ahead and say okay. All right. So that is what the README file does. Composer.json. Every package has its own composer.json. So if you have dependencies within your package that you need to install, you can install them here. Same thing with package.json. If you have JavaScript dependencies that you need within your package specifically, you can install them there. Rename project, of course, is the file that we're going to run later to rename our package from package skeleton to something else. And you can see it's doing a lot of searching and replacing there. And then we have, I'm going to come back to this one in a minute, we have webpack.mix. Now webpack.mix is what configures our, Webpack is essentially our asset builder. It's what takes all of our JavaScript, CSS, and all that stuff, combines them and builds them, puts them into that public folder. So if we add a JavaScript file, we're going to need to add it here. If we add a Sass file, we're going to need to add it here. And you can see right here, it's doing something interesting. This is something we added recently to the package skeleton to make development a little bit easier, actually quite a bit easier. We are requiring something called webpack.callback. If it doesn't work, it's okay. We just ignore the error. But if this file does exist, so this is our example file, webpack.callback.js. So what happens is once it's done building all of your assets, all of your JavaScript and CSS, it will call that file, and that will enable us to publish the assets automatically when the build is done. So that's something that's really important. I know that's been an issue for some people when doing package development, is that you make a change to your JavaScript or your CSS and you don't see it, or you have to run a certain command. Sometimes you even have to totally reinstall ProcessMaker. This helps you to get around that by enabling the publishing to happen automatically. So we'll go over that a little bit later. Okay, so that said, it looks like our Vagrant up command has run. So now if everything worked, we should be able to log in via SSH. Okay, there we go. One thing to note is you can open VirtualBox UI at any time to see the status of your VirtualBox. So you can see ProcessMaker is running. You can see it's running Ubuntu 64-bit, all the information about it. You can open and close that at will. It doesn't affect the machine itself. That just allows you to see the status of it. Okay, so now that we're in Vagrant SSH, I'm going to go back to our core repo. And I'm going to run this command, php artisan ProcessMaker install. Okay, let's see what's going on there. Oh, we have to switch to our ProcessMaker directory. So when you first log in, it doesn't take you directly into the ProcessMaker directory. I'm going to go ahead and switch to that. Run php artisan ProcessMaker install. And it's going to give you a warning. This application installs a new version of ProcessMaker. You must have your database credentials available in order to continue. Are you ready? Yes. Okay, it looks like all of our dependencies are available. Enter your host. So we're going to specify localhost. Our port is going to be 3306. ProcessMaker is our database name. Our username, and I'm basing this on what I'm seeing here. Our MySQL username is Homestead. Our password is secret. Would you like to set up different database credentials or use the same ProcessMaker connection? So just to give a quick example of this, we're going to go with same because our database is just one database. But if we have a customer who wants to run an on-premise database, in addition to running our software in the cloud, we allow them to store all of their sensitive data on-site, where all of the metadata will be stored off-site. So that's what this option does. But in this case, we're going to say same because it's one database. What is the URL? So I'm going to go ahead and copy this URL. Would you like to enable telescope debugging? I'm going to say no to that for now. And then it's going to ask me for my desired admin username. I'm going to go with admin. Email address, I'll just put mine. Admin password, I'm going to type in admin123. is not a secure password, so I don't recommend that unless you're only doing it locally. Enter the first name of the admin user. We'll go with Ryan. There we go. So you can see it's running all of our database migrations now. It's also running our seeders. That's something that pre-fills the database with basic information. And it is also running our Docker executor installers. That allows us to run script tasks. So as we wait for that to happen, there is one more step we need to run before we can successfully access our instance in Chrome. For Mac OS X, we need to trust our SSL certificate. This allows us to run everything over HTTPS locally, just so we can make sure everything works properly. So I'm going to go to my sites folder here. Let's see where that is. So I'm going to follow the instructions in your repository root /storage/SSL. Double click on processmaker.local.processmaker.com.crt. That's our certificate. It's going to ask me to add that to my keychain. I'm going to say add. And then before I close out of here, I need to find that. There it is. You can see it's not trusted right now, so I need to double click on it. Click on trust. Say always trust. And then I'm just going to close out. It's going to ask me either for my password or for my watch or my Touch ID to make sure that that's accurate. And there we go. The certificate is marked as trusted for this account. Basically what that does is allows you to visit the ProcessMaker, your local ProcessMaker instance without getting a bunch of SSL warnings. So as we wait for that, let's see. You can see in the README, there are some other things that you can do here, none of which we need to do in order to get this up and running. So let's see. I'm just going to test something out here as we're waiting. See if we can actually log in. All right, thank you, Chrome. So I'm going to paste that URL. Now, just keeping in mind that all it's doing now is installing the script executors. So it should not interfere with us being able to log in. So I'm going to log in as admin, admin123. There we are. Getting a few server errors, probably due to the fact that this is still running. Server error. That might have something to do with notifications as well. That's something we can troubleshoot later. But you can see here, we are able to access our instance. Except the API doesn't want to load. So as we're waiting for that, let's go ahead and start installing our package skeleton. Sonia, real quick, do you want to explain the difference between the connector skeleton and the package skeleton?
Sure. So as Ryan said, we have two skeletons here. We have the package skeleton and the connector skeleton. The connector skeleton just provides you like a base for developing connectors within Modeler. So we have two different like BPMN types that you could develop, either a service task or a call activity. And this just provides you a base for that to get started. And then the package skeleton is just an overall base for just developing packages. So depending on what you want to do, you can use either or.
Yep, and in this case, we're going to focus on the package skeleton. Okay, so like I said, in any of these repos, you're able to go to this code section, make sure you're on the right branch, go to this code section and find the repo or find the address that you want to clone. So I'm going to do this, Copy that. I'm going to open a new terminal window. I'm going to go to my sites directory. You can see we still have ProcessMaker. Let's take a look here. Let's see where we want to put it exactly. I'm going to create a folder called ProcessMaker-packages. I'm going to go into that folder, and I'm going to run git clone package skeleton. Switch to the package skeleton. And now I'm going to follow the instructions in the README here. So we get cloned, we CD'd into the folder. Now we want to rename the project. So we're going to run php rename project.php. We're going to just call this hello world. Replacing. So it went through all of our code and it replaced package skeleton with package hello world. So I'm going to go back up, and I'm also going to rename that folder to package hello world. Okay. There we go. We're going to go in there. We're going to run composer install. We may have to run it with the memory limit off, but because this is a smaller package, we might not have to. So let's see if that works. Good. Worked just fine. We'll run npm install. Then we're going to run npm run dev. Okay, let's see why that didn't work out. Crossenv command not found. So this is something that comes up from time to time. Crossenv generally is installed globally on a machine. So what I'm going to do is run npm install crossenv-g. And what that is going to do is install that specific package globally on my machine. The reason it couldn't find it, I think I need to run that as sudo. The reason it couldn't find it is because we don't specify that that's a dependency within the package itself. Okay, there we go. So now I might have to close out of the terminal again. Okay, we're going to run npm run dev one more time, see if that works. There we go. Now it has access to crossenv globally. There we go. Compiled successfully, and there you have it. Okay, so let's open Visual Studio Code. One thing I like to do here is create a new workspace. I'm going to open a new window. And we're going to open our ProcessMaker packages, package hello world in there, just so we have, now we have two VS Code windows. We have our core code base and we have our hello world package. Okay. Now, what we need to do is go into our, within core, we need to go into our homestead.yaml. You can see here it says uncomment and modify the following if you want to link a local directory for package development. So we're going to go ahead and uncomment this. ProcessMaker plugins is what we generally call it. So I'm just going to rename that folder real quick just to conform to that standard. There we go. So we're essentially what this is doing is mapping ProcessMaker, the ProcessMaker plugins directory to that's on our host, our Mac instance. It's going to map that to a different directory within our Vagrant instance. So I'm going to save that. Now, once you've made that change, it doesn't apply automatically. You have to go in and reload Vagrant. So I'm going to go ahead and exit our Vagrant SSH here. Say Vagrant reload. And what that does is it reprovisions our Vagrant instance with that change. So now once our Vagrant instance restarts, we'll have access to that directory. Any other questions so far? I know it's been kind of a kind of a whirlwind here.
Ryan, you okay? Do you need a few minute break or anything?
Yeah, I think it would be nice to take a quick breather.
Okay. Do we want to take 5 minutes and then come back at like 11:15?
Yeah, that works for me. Now that we're waiting on this anyway.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. All right, everybody. Everyone there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, so let's continue. So just to do a quick recap here. So we talked about installing ProcessMaker, configuring your environment for development. We talked about the basics, cloning and configuring the skeleton. We're going to talk a little bit about writing unit tests, a little bit more about the package provider, routes, blade template changes, Vue.js changes. Then we're going to talk about deployment and injecting components. Okay, so we just got done running Vagrant Reload, so we're going to go back into Vagrant SSH. Now you can see here, when I list that directory, we now have access to our ProcessMaker plugins directory. So I'm just going to switch to it real quick and make sure that we see our Hello World package in there, which we do. So that's great. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back into the ProcessMaker folder. I'm going to run, well, one thing first, we're going to go into the composer.json. Now you can see up here in our repositories area, we have something listed for Laravel chunk upload. We're also going to list our packages. So when we're running this locally, we need to specify a local repository that contains our package that we're working on. So all we're doing is specifying the relative path from this file to our ProcessMaker plugins directory and our Hello World package. What that does is it enables Composer to know where to look when we're installing the Hello World package. Otherwise, it has no idea where to find the Hello World package because it's not published to a public Composer repository. So now I'm going to run Composer require ProcessMaker / package Hello World. See if that works. Might run into some issues here, but hopefully it will work. Okay. So we ran into our API rate limit again. Because we're running this from within the Vagrant instance, it doesn't have access to what we generated before, the token that we generated before. So we're going to generate another token. You could use the same token if you had it saved, but I didn't save the other token. So I'm just going to generate a new one. Now we're storing it. The URL supplied for the path home vagrant Naira does not exist. Interesting. Let me see if I had a solution for that locally. I'm on my local machine now. This is the one that's already been configured. I just want to see if I had anything in here regarding Naira. /Naira. ProcessMaker Naira. Interesting. Okay, so just to fix that issue, for some reason, with our latest ProcessMaker, with our latest Composer JSON, it looks like we have some kind of issue with Naira. So I'm going to go ahead and clone this repo locally. I'm going to move it into the ProcessMaker plugins directory. Okay. So now within our Vagrant SSH, I go back to ProcessMaker plugins, we should have our Naira instance in there, and then I'm going to specify that path here. So now we'll know where to find the Naira package as well. Okay, so now we're going to run composer require ProcessMaker package hello world one more time. Okay, why isn't that working? Home Vagrant Naira repository does not exist.
I believe I've had come across this error before, Ryan. And if you go into, I'm not sure, if you go into your Homestead YAML file, if you comment out, yeah, right there, that tends to like fix it for me, as long as I have
Naira locally.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we're gonna put that actually here in our top level. Okay, so one more time, we're gonna do Vagrant reload because we just modified our Homestead YAML. So you can see as you go along the way to set up your development instance, you're gonna run into a lot of little issues that you kind of have to solve. And a lot of this stuff is not directly documented, so that's probably something that we can improve as we move forward. But a lot of this stuff is stuff that can also be fixed, so it's something to take note of.
Not only that, but everybody may have different issues. Sometimes it'll work without an issue at all.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends on your environment and versions and what's going on right now.
Yeah. So just to give you an overview of this file while we're waiting here, you can see the homestead.yaml is the configuration file that specifies how Vagrant works. There's actually a Vagrant file that specifies that directly, but the homestead.yaml feeds into that file. And you can see the IP address is listed there. That's the IP address that we put into our etc host file earlier. We specify the amount of memory, which is 2 gigabytes, specify the number of CPUs, what our provider, our box, our version number is, where our SSH keys are. That's why I had to run SSH keygen before. Folders area, of course, specifies which folders are available within the Vagrant instance, and that's why we had to reload. And then the sites specifies exactly where the site is located and the URL of the site. You can specify databases, the name, and the host name there as well. Okay, so it looks like that's done. Okay, so you can see we now have our Naira directory. Okay. All right, so let's try this one more time and hope that this is the time that it works. Third time's the charm, hopefully. So we're running composer require ProcessMaker package hello world. While we're waiting for that, I just want to point out, if you go to the About page of ProcessMaker, we list all of the packages that are installed. So you can see here, we have some that are installed by default, including Naira, which is the one that was giving us trouble before. We also have our modeler, screen builder. So this lists all of our JavaScript and composer packages that are installed that are from ProcessMaker. We also indicate the status of our index search, which right now is disabled. And also you can report issues here, access the documentation, which is great, by the way. We have some really thorough documentation. So if you're ever looking to find information about how to use something within ProcessMaker, I highly recommend looking at the documentation. Lewis has done a great job collaborating with us engineers to really put together some great documentation. You'll see here, you can also, if you go to the admin section, queue management is a big part of what makes ProcessMaker run. So that's something you're probably going to look at a lot if you're developing for ProcessMaker. So you can see what jobs are running. You can see the workload of each of the queues. You can see we now have different queues for different jobs. So our BPMN takes our highest priority. So anything that's running as part of a workflow will take our highest priority. Then we have our default and our high and low priorities down there. You can see any recent jobs that have run. We probably don't have any at the moment because we haven't run anything yet, but you can kind of take a look and see what that looks like there. You can see our API stopped giving out errors, so that's good. Now we did run into our fatal memory error here. So I'm just going to go ahead and go back to the beginning here and type in composer memory limit equals -1. We'll allow that to run in the background once again.
Then, Ryan, if you can point us how to install a private package, paid package, because, for example, we need to use vocabularies in some project. We don't have that packages in the open source version. So how we install it locally?
Gotcha. So that's basically what we're doing with the skeleton package. The skeleton package is just like any other package within ProcessMaker. So if you go to GitHub and you look up our packages, so you said the vocabularies package, right? If we look for our vocab package, click on that. We're going to follow the same process that we followed with the skeleton package. Just going to go ahead and copy this. That is interesting. Okay, so we need to run, what was the command again for that? Ignore platform requirements. Let me fix that before we move on here. Okay. So anyway, as I was saying, to install a paid package, as long as you have access to the GitHub repo, you can go in here, copy that.
If you do need access to the GitHub and private repos, Siev is the gatekeeper for that, and his team can help to teach you access.
So you can see it's going to ask me for my username and password since this is a private repo. Let me find my GitHub password real quick, type it in. Invalid username or password. You know what? I think I have to generate a password. Or I can upload my SSH key, which might be the easiest way of doing it. So we'll say this is our demo Mac. I'm going to go to my SSH directory. Go. So you can see my public key. I'm going to paste that into GitHub. Now it has my RC demo key. Where did we go? I think I lost the page I was on before. There it is, the vocab package. So instead of the HTTPS, I'm going to copy the SSH one. Git clone SSH. There we go. And it recognized me because I copied my public key into GitHub. So now you'll see we have our package vocabularies listed there. My goodness, why doesn't this want to work? Installation failed. The following exception is caused by lack of memory. Well, that is interesting. Now we are running this within our Vagrant machine. We can try running it outside of it. Sometimes you'll run into more memory limits within your Vagrant machine than you will outside of it. So let's try that. You'll notice too that things tend to run faster outside of your Vagrant instance. So I would recommend never running npm run within your Vagrant instance. That takes a very long time because file access is a lot slower within the Vagrant virtual machine. And Composer, you can run either place. Generally, it will be slower within your Vagrant machine, and you'll see that you run into some memory limits like we just did. So I recommend trying at least to run them on your host machine instead. So so we'll come back to the vocab package in a minute as soon as this is done. But essentially what you would do is you would do the same thing. So you would say, you would add a repo for the vocab package. Say path. You're going to type in the path to that package. There we go. Okay, good. Finally ran. So now when I go back into ProcessMaker and take a look at the installed packages. Oops. Okay. Why is that happening now? Looks like our virtual machine might have locked up because I'm not able to type into it either. So it looks like something went wrong with our virtual machine. So this is where the VirtualBox UI comes in handy. It says that it's running. I can't exit out of it. So let's see what's going on here. Yeah, you see it's locking up for some reason. It's okay though. We can just go back into here, run Vagrant halt. That should hopefully shut it down. And then we'll run Vagrant up again. So this is one of those things you're going to run into from time to time as well, where I've never actually had this particular issue happen, but sometimes things might lock up, or you might have to restart. Turning it off and on again is always a good troubleshooting step with anything to do with development. So we're gonna.
It's the first fix, right?
What's that?
It's the first fix you need to try.
Yep, always try that first. That's what I always say. When family members come to me with tech issues, I always ask them, did you unplug it and plug it back in again? And it's the same thing with this. So hopefully this will work. You can see kind of behind the scenes here how it's running. Okay, and that's good. We actually got something out of it. So now let's try and go back to our instance again. There we go. We're back up. It looks like our Composer install kind of did something to our virtual machine for some reason. So you can see, hey, there it is, ProcessMaker package hello world. So it's finally installed. Awesome. So now, just to follow up on the question that you asked earlier, let's go ahead and install the package skeleton as well. So we're going to do the same thing that we did for the hello world package. We already added a repo for the vocabularies package. Now I'm going to go ahead and just change this to vocabularies. Run that. And again, we've discovered that it helps to run it outside of the instance rather than inside of it. You can see that it's already added it to our list of requirements here. It did fail for some reason. It looks like, let's see, we need the packages package. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that too. So sometimes when you encounter an error, it can be kind of intimidating because you just see a big error. But a lot of the time, the error message content is actually helpful. So it tells you right here that ProcessMaker package vocabularies requires the ProcessMaker packages package. So following that line of thought, if we go to our ProcessMaker repo and we find the packages package, we can do the same thing with this. So we're going to copy that. I'm going to go back over to my ProcessMaker plugins directory, and I'm going to clone that package. And then in here, I'm going to do the same thing I did with all my other packages. I'm going to add a repo for that. Okay. So we've got our packages package. Let's see now. Now that we have a repo specified in there, it should be able to find that automatically and install it for us. There we go. So you can see it's installing the other requirements that were needed by the vocabularies package. Sometimes you'll see these deprecation notices. That's something that we can fix eventually, but it's not something that will actually prevent anything from working. And you'll see everything installed successfully. So now if we go back into our About page and refresh, we have our vocabularies package. So there you go. So now if we go to the designer, we should see our vocabularies. Okay, great. Anyway, I think what happened there is we didn't run the install for it. So if we go ahead and go into our Vagrant machine again, one quick hint, you can type PHP Artisan. You can also just type art, which actually, oh, if you go to ProcessMaker, we have to go into the ProcessMaker folder, type art. That's a shortcut to not have to type PHP Artisan. So you can see here now, if we look at our list of packages, package commands in here, we have our vocabularies install. So let's go ahead and run that. So I'm going to run art package vocabularies install. Looks like it's been installed. So now if we click on it, hopefully it will actually work. There it is. All right. So we also have our package Hello World install. This probably isn't doing a whole lot right now, but there it is. So now if we go to the admin section, you'll see we have our skeleton package in our navigation there. We also have one up on top here. So if I click on that, that will take us to our sample page that was originally constructed. Now, if I go into our package Hello World repo, remember what I was telling you about before. Okay, I think I moved it. That's why I couldn't find it. Just one sec. Okay. So if we go into our webpack.mix, you can see these are our assets that need to be generated. We also have our example file for our Webpack callback. So I'm going to rename that. It's no longer going to be an example. You can see what it's doing here is it's running a command where it sets the Vagrant directory. So that should be the correct Vagrant directory. And then it goes into Vagrant SSH and it runs the publish command for this package. So if I go back here, I go back into our package hello world. Run npm run. Now you can run dev or you can run watch. Now the cool thing about watch is it will update everything on the fly. So as you make changes to files, it will automatically update them. So I'm going to run npm run watch. It's compiled it. Now run the command. It will run the command that we specified earlier. Now it says the working directory for Vagrant doesn't exist. We might have to specify more clearly what it is. So it might be users Ryan Cooley. So let's try that one more time. There we go. So you can see it actually published all of our assets to the necessary file. It put it in the public vendor folder in ProcessMaker core. So now when I go here and refresh, you'll see everything works. But if I want to go ahead and make a change, so say I go to our resources, our JavaScript components, and our samples listing. Let's see. Now you can see as you open different files, VS Code will give you suggestions for plugins that would be helpful. So if I install the View plugin, it's installing it right now. Anyway, once that's done, it will enable code highlighting for View files, which is really nice. So let's say, there it is. So let's say I go ahead and change something in here. I'm trying to see what's something that I could change really easily. Let's take a look here. Okay, so for example, I'm just going to change this to say hello world. This is just in our Blade template. So if I go ahead and make that change and refresh, should see it immediately, which I do. If I go back into our excuse me, into our samples listing component here, you can see I have different field names for this table. So if I want to change it from name to title, for example, I save that. And because we have npm run watch running in the background, as I hit save, it automatically rebuilt that asset and it automatically republished it. So if I hit refresh, it changed it to title. So I know that was one of the holdups for a lot of people, was being able to make changes on the fly like that. So that's why it's really important to properly configure your Webpack callback so that you make sure that everything gets published on the fly. And then using npm run watch makes it super simple. Everything is updated within seconds of updating that. So any questions about anything we've covered so far? Because I'm going to move on to the next thing after this.
Yeah, just be aware of the time. It's 11:45.
Okay. So I do want to give a little bit of time to Sonia to talk about registering injecting components. So if it's okay to move on to that, I'd like to do that now.
Thank you, Ryan. You did a great job in presenting all that information.
Thank you.
Go ahead and start sharing my screen. 1 second. Oh, someone needs to enable me to share my screen. Can someone do that for me, please?
Just made you the host, so you should be able to now.
Okay. So let's make sure I have the right screen. All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Sonia. I'm also an engineer for PM4. And given the time constraint that we have, I'm going to try to run through as quickly as possible some features of injecting into Screen Builder. I know one of the questions were how to register your own kind of screen type in a package, from a package, so registering your own screen type from a package. In PM4, we have 2 standard screen types, such as form and displays. But there are packages that do register their own, like emails and advanced forms. You could review some of those packages in our GitHub repository. Those are the connector send emails and the advanced form package. Both of those packages register their own screen types. So these are great references to use if you need to have a more hands-on example of how they are set up. For now, I'm going to go ahead and start. The first thing we need to do is actually go ahead and start seeding in a screen type. So in our package, this is from the package skeleton here. We need to seed in a new screen type. And if we go into our database, this is my SQL, ProSQL. We have a table here called screen types. These are the registered screen types that I have on my installation. By default, it will only say form and display. I have the advanced forms and the email package already installed. And then this is my custom screen that I'm gonna show you how I got that. So starting out, we need to create a seeder. So here in this directory, under sources, I have a seeds directory and a custom seed type seeder.php file. In here, I am bringing in a class called screen type. And then under this run function, I am just creating a new screen called custom. So since this is our seeder, we need it to also be ran when we install our package. So under the routes console, we need to make sure that we have a seeder that's pointing to our custom screen type seeder. So when you run the install command for the package, this gets added into the database. So you will see it here in the screen types table. Next, we need to go ahead and create a new file called type custom.js under our resource.js directory. And this file does three things. So here I have an example of us using a control from Screen Builder called form input. And I'm importing this form builder's control from Screen Builder directly. You would need to make sure you have Screen Builder installed in your package. And you could do that by running npm install at ProcessMaker Screen Builder. And then you'll be able to import any kind of controls from Screen Builder. So let me go ahead and pull up Screen Builder here. So this is my local Screen Builder repo. And in here, this is that forms builder control file that we are importing. And this exports all of our our fields, all our fields that we provide in Screen Builder to be used. I am referencing the form input. So that is this control here. So I'm bringing that in by looking for the control rendering binding by its name, form mask input. So here, rendering binding, form mask import, and that's going to just bring that control right in here called form input. I am also importing a custom component that I built for this package. I am calling it basic input, and I am importing it from my basic input control. So if we go into this file here, I have this basic input control.js file. And this is set up similar to how the form builder controls are in Screen Builder. So you could basically just copy like a control from here and bring that over into your package. What you want to do is, if you have a custom view component, here I'm importing my custom component basic input. And I have a view component. It's coming from my components directory. I have a component here, and here's my basic view component, which is just a simple input field with a label and some helper text. We want to import that into our basic input controls. And then we are going to make our configuration that component. So we want to make sure that whenever we are in editor mode or in rendering mode, that we are using this basic input component. These configurations are what allow you to control the configurations of that input. So this would be a label, this would be the name of the input, the placeholder, validation, so forth. Here are the inspector controls for this custom component. So you are able to copy and paste any of these additional fields or these configurations. If you want some custom fields, here I have a custom field here, and I am just passing that in. Actually, I didn't pass that in. That should have been passed in to my configuration object here, because this is going to have it saved to our screen configuration. So yeah, that should have been there. Okay, so back in our custom type JS file, so that's the control that I'm importing. Here, I am setting up an array here called custom screen control. So I'm just importing all the controls that I want this screen to contain. Then here we are also listening for an event that's emitted by Screen Builder. And once that happens, we are just wanting to grab each one of our controls, and we're going to run this add control method. And that's going to put it into our sidebar, the sidebar of the screen. So let me go ahead and show you that. So I have custom screen. Here in my dropdown, you can see I have a custom screen already listed. And I'm just do a test category and save that. Here is my custom screen, and here are my two inputs that I imported. And then you could go into preview mode, and you are able to input data, and it will emit it to our data object. One other thing to note when you are developing this is that you do need to include this new file type custom.js in our Webpack so that it's included when we build. So here I'm referencing that here. And then you also need to add an event listener within the package service provider for when Screen Builder is starting. Because what this is going to do is inject our script, our custom type script, into the screen so that it can load all of those controls and for the right screen. So that's like a really quick rundown on injecting or registering a new screen type from a package. Is there any questions about that? Okay. I know we have like 5 minutes left. Do you guys want me to run through some more topics, or do you want to hold off for another time? What would you like?
I think we're going to do a workshop next week with all the same people to answer the questions from Enrique. This might be a good place to stop, just so that we, because you're naturally at a good place to stop. Unless anybody wants that. I know that other people have meetings at 12. But I don't know, can we get anything else done in 5 minutes, or do we have any questions that need answering?
Yeah, I mean, that's as far as we can go in 5 minutes, but if anyone does have any quick questions, we can answer them.
So when do we want to So obviously, yes, there's still a lot more that we can cover. When, and you wanted to do a workshop, right? When are you expecting to do that?
I'm talking with Enrique right now. We'll work out a time for next week.
Okay, great. As long as that workshop is recorded, that'll be great. We obviously don't want to, unfortunately, take time out of your team's hands. So the more we record these sessions, the better we can just reference that in future training.
Cool.
Yeah, exactly. Let's schedule something for next week with Alan. And of course, we have that document, shared document with the team with some questions that are there. So maybe we can prepare the agenda for the workshop with Alan based on that questions we have right now.
For me.
Yeah. Okay, I think this is this was great. Thank you for the workshop, guys. Really a good job. I will share the recording with the team, and I think this is a very good basic to any developer that to start working with ProcessMaker packages.
Awesome.
Thank you, Ryan and Sonia. Great job, guys. Really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, Sanjay, can you send me again the house grants, please?
I'm sorry, say it again.
If you can make me host again.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
1 second.
Yeah, if you go to participants and.
Oh, okay. That's how you do it. All right. More, make host. Okay. There you go. You should be hosting again, Enrique. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.